start with the actions and pathophysiological roles of the prostaglandins, thromboxanes and prostacyclins. So the COX pathway, it produces prostaglandins or thromboxanes, as we have seen, TXA2, B2, or prostacyclin, that is PGI2, which is a prostaglandin which is named as prostacyclin. Okay, so now before going into the actions, let me tell you that as you can see the heading over here, it is discussing both actions as well as pathophysiological role. In the earlier chapters, all the autocoids, we have seen the pharmacological actions first, and later on we have discussed the pathophysiological roles, right? Separately it is discussed. Okay, may it be histamine, serotonin, platelet activating factor, okay, whatever autocoids we have covered so far, everywhere it is discussed separately. But this is the only chapter which both the actions as well as the pathophysiological roles, both are discussed together, taking into consideration a particular system on which these prostaglandins are acting. Okay, say for example, if you take a case of CVS, so first the actions is discussed on CVS, what action it produces, and then after that the role is discussed, that is pathophysiological role, maybe in the normal physiology or the pathology pertaining to that system is discussed. So it is discussed simultaneously under this particular chapter. Okay, so to start with first part under actions and pathophysiological role, which is discussed for prostaglandins, thromboxanes and prostacyclins. Okay, so actions, if you can see, these are diverse. It it depends upon the type of prostaglandin. Generally, which type of, there are several types of prostaglandins, right? So specific types of prostaglandins only will act at a particular system, whereas there are certain examples in which the two prostaglandins, they may have opposite effect. Okay, say for example, the actions on the platelet, both pro-aggregatory as well as anti-aggregatory effects are shown by prostaglandins. Okay, both the type of actions can be shown by prostaglandin and thromboxanes, as we are discussing all these together. Okay, so now to start with the actions and the role, the first one is the CVS, cardiovascular system. Okay, so now actions are differing as per the type of prostaglandin, whether it is a thromboxane or whether it is a prostacyclin. Okay, so everywhere the names will be written. Okay, now let's start with the first one, that is over here, PGE2 and PGF2 alpha. Okay, now what type of action these two PGs show? They produce vasodilatation in most of the vascular beds. Okay, so they dilate the blood vessels in most, meaning it is not a universal dilatation, or it does not produce overall vasodilatation in all the blood vessels. Okay, so it produces vasodilatation, that is its major action, but vasodilatation is not shown in all the vascular beds. That is, all the blood vessels will not be dilated, that is, diameter will not be increased in case of all the blood vessels. Here you can see that PGF2 alpha, it constricts many of the larger vessels, including the pulmonary veins and the arteries. Okay, so this particular PGF2 alpha, here we have seen that it produces vasodilatation, but it shows vasoconstrictor property also, specifically in the pulmonary veins and the arteries, that is those blood vessels which are supplying towards the lungs, pulmonary veins and arteries. Okay, now because of this vasodilatory action, PGE2, it has the action of fall in BP. Obviously, when the blood vessels will get dilated, the pressure with which the blood is flowing through, that will decrease, right? So it produces fall in BP. Okay, when it is specifically injected by IV route. Okay, now coming to the next one, that is PGI2. Okay, up to here we have discussed about the PGE2 and PGF2 alpha. Okay, now coming to PGI2. Now this is uniformly vasodilatory, that is, it produces vasodilatation in all the types of blood vessels. Okay, and it is more potent hypotensive, that is, it produces more degree of fall in BP as compared to PGE2. We have seen over here PGE2 it produces fall in BP. So even it is more potent, PGI2 is more potent in producing the fall in BP because it is more potent in producing the vasodilatory action, and it shows vasodilatory action in almost all the blood vessels found in the body. Okay, the next thromboxane TXA2. Now this particular thromboxane, it is consistently producing the vasoconstriction. Okay, so far we have seen that vasodilatory action is seen. PGE2 F2 alpha, it has vasoconstrictor as well as dilatory action depending upon the vascular bed, but thromboxane A2 it has vasoconstrictor property, that is it will produce the decrease in the diameter of the blood vessels. It has vasoconstrictor action. Okay, then PG endoperoxides, that is PGG2 and H2 cyclic endoperoxides which are synthesized. Okay, in the first step when cyclooxygenase act on the arachidonic acid, these are the ones which are formed, PGG2 and PGH2, which are highly unstable and they rapidly get converted into further different types of prostaglandins or thromboxanes or prostacyclin depending upon the type of enzyme which is acting on it. Okay, but if you consider the action of these endoperoxide, that is PGG2 and H2, these are inherently vasoconstrictor, that is it will produce vasoconstriction, but the action is very short lived, though their action on blood vessels is a vasoconstrictor one. But as I have told you, under the synthesis also I have told you that these are highly unstable. They will immediately get converted into further different types of prostaglandins or thromboxane or prostacyclin. So basically these produce vasoconstrictor action. But since they are highly unstable, they immediately get converted, especially into the PGI2. And PGI2 we have seen that it has a vasodilatory action. Okay, so as such these endoperoxide have vasoconstrictor action, but they often produce vasodilatation or a biphasic response is seen, that is constriction immediately followed by the vasodilatation. That's because immediately these two may get converted into prostacyclin PGI2, which may be generated in the blood vessels themselves. So it will result in the vasodilatation immediately after PGI2 is generated in the blood vessel. Okay, so this is to do with the actions on the blood vessels. Now coming to the actions on the heart. Heart is also a part of the CVS, right? Now this PGE2 and F2 alpha, we have seen that mostly it has vasodilatory action plus it has vasoconstrictor action also. Okay, on the larger arteries and veins, specifically those which are supplying to the lungs. Okay, but basically mostly it produces vasodilatory action. So because of vasodilatory action, it produces fall in BP, right? Okay, so vasodilatation meaning it will result in fall in BP. So because the BP is falling, your body will try to adjust that blood pressure. It will not allow your blood pressure to fall, okay, below normal. Moment it falls below normal, your homeostasis will come into picture and your heart will get stimulated. Okay, so because of this fall in BP, this PGE2 and F2 alpha also stimulates the heart. Okay, either by direct action, reflexly also it is doing because of the fall in BP, plus it also has a weak direct action on the heart also. Okay, both the ways, directly as well as indirectly, the heart may get stimulated. And as a consequence of the stimulation of the heart, when heart is getting stimulated, obviously the heart rate will increase, force of contraction will increase. So because of this, cardiac output, that is the amount of blood which is pumped by the heart in 1 minute, that will obviously increase because the heart is getting stimulated. So cardiac output is also increased by the prostaglandins. Okay, now coming to the role. So far we have seen what is the action of these prostaglandins on the CVS. Now let us see what is the role it is playing. Okay, physiological or pathophysiological role which is played by the PGs. Okay, now coming to the first role, PGI2, that is prostacyclin. So this is involved in the regulation of local vascular tone, specifically as a dilator. Okay, so now in your body, blood vessels either get dilated or constricted depending upon your body needs. Now supposing if you are exercising, your tissues require more amount of blood, the blood vessels will automatically get dilated, so that more of the blood supply will go in that particular region. Okay, so this PGI2, it plays, or it has an important physiological role in regulating or controlling that vascular tone. Okay, so that the blood flow in particular certain regions is adjusted. Okay, so specifically it has a dilatory role. Whenever vasodilatation is required, PGI2 is released. Okay, or it is synthesized and released. The next role which PGs play, okay, PGs along with the LTs, that is leukotrienes and other autocoids, these may mediate the vasodilatation and exudation which is associated with the inflammation. Inflammation, you are all aware of. Vasodilatation is seen so that the blood flow in that particular region is increased, capillary permeability is increased, so that the fluid part, excepting your blood cells and the plasma proteins, all the other dissolved material, it gets moved out of the blood capillaries, and it will start accumulating in that inflammatory site. So exudation, because of which the swelling will take place in that site of inflammation. So these two phenomena, which are very important characteristic feature of inflammation, these could be mediated by PGs along with the LTs. Okay, so these actions which are seen at the inflammation, this is a pathophysiological role. So this is basically carried out with the help of prostaglandins and the leukotrienes acting together. Okay. Now the next role, the third role, basically here PGE2 is involved. Okay. Now before going into this, let us go back to your anatomy. Okay. Now in your anatomy you have studied about your cardiovascular system, right? So a cardiovascular system in the baby which is growing in the mother's womb. Okay, so that is a little bit different than the baby after it is born, right? The fetal circulation. Okay, fetus is the baby which is growing in the mother's womb, in the uterus, right? So the fetal circulation, it has certain differences as compared to the normal babies. After the birth, there are certain changes which are taking place in the circulatory system, right? Okay, because when the baby is in the mother's womb, it does not have its own mechanism to convert the deoxygenated blood into the oxygenated blood, because the baby's lungs are non-functional. Okay, they are non-functional. The baby cannot breathe. So the baby will depend upon the supply from the placenta, which is a connection between the baby and the mother. So from here the blood vessels will carry all the required oxygen and the nutrients, and it will be supplied to the fetus. So the fetal circulation is slightly different. There are certain provisions which are made in the fetal circulations. Okay, and after the birth, these adjustments which are made in the fetal circulation, these are changed. Okay, and these are the ones which are given in the box. These are the changes which are taking place after the baby is born. Okay, now what we are interested over here is, this also you all have covered under the CVS chapter in your anatomy also. Okay, there is a connection between the aorta and the pulmonary artery. Okay, pulmonary artery is the one which carries the blood from the right ventricle towards the lungs. Usually what is the function? It carries the deoxygenated blood from your right side of the heart, so that it gets converted into oxygenated blood because of the exchange of gases. Carbon dioxide is given out, oxygen is taken up in the lungs, and again the fresh blood, that is oxygenated blood, it will come back towards your left atria. From left atria it goes into left ventricle. From here through aorta it is pumped throughout the body. Okay. Now in case of the fetus, the baby which is not born, which is there in the mother's womb, okay, lungs are not functional. No exchange of gases takes place in the lungs because the baby is not breathing. The oxygen which the baby requires, it gets from the mother's maternal circulation. Okay, from the mother it gets the oxygenated blood. Okay, so there is no purpose of sending this blood to the lungs of the baby. Okay, so to prevent that, there is a opening, there is a shunt, it is known as a shunt. There is a connection in between the pulmonary artery and the aorta. This is the pulmonary artery, right, which is going towards your lungs, left and right pulmonary arteries. Okay, it branches into. But you can see over here there is a opening. This is the aorta, arch of aorta, and this is pulmonary artery. This is actually supposed to carry the deoxygenated blood, and aorta is supposed to carry the oxygenated blood. But here there is a opening, there is a shunt which allows the mixing of these blood, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Okay, now why this provision is there? So that the blood of this baby should not go to the lungs, because lungs are not functional. The blood should remain circulated over here itself. It should not go towards the lung. There is no exchange of gases which is taking place. But after the birth, when the baby is born, supposing if this particular ductus arteriosus, it is known as that particular opening which is there in between these two, the connection which is there between the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Supposing after the baby is born, if it remains open, what will happen? Here, once the baby is born, deoxygenated blood, it will go to the lungs, exchange of gases will take place. Again, the oxygenated blood will come back to the atria, ventricles, and then oxygenated blood is provided throughout the body. Now, imagine if this particular shunt which is there, that is ductus arteriosus, if it remains open over here after the birth, what will happen? The deoxygenated and the oxygenated blood will mix together and it will create a problem. Okay, but this is avoided naturally because of this conversion or because of this adjustment. That is ductus arteriosus, which is present in the baby, in the fetus, it is closed after the baby is born. Okay, and what keeps this particular ductus arteriosus open is your prostaglandins. Okay, that is PGE2. It is continuously produced locally in the ductus arteriosus. Here PG synthesis is taking place constantly during the fetal life, so that this ductus arteriosus is kept open throughout the fetal life. Okay, but once the baby is born, spontaneously this particular ductus arteriosus closes and it gets converted into ligamentum arteriosum. Okay, now this takes place spontaneously, that is naturally after the baby is born, this opening will close off, it will get converted into ligamentum arteriosum. Now supposing if does not close, supposing if it remains open, sometimes it happens that the ductus arteriosus does not close, it fails to occur spontaneously. So what you can do? Now what is keeping it open? It is the prostaglandins, that is PGE2, which is synthesized locally over here, which is keeping that ductus arteriosus open. Okay, so once the baby is born, if this ductus arteriosus does not close, if the spontaneous closure does not take place, what you can do is you can administer the NSAIDs, that is aspirin or indomethacin are used for this particular purpose. Okay, so NSAIDs, what they do? They act by inhibiting the prostaglandin synthesis. So these aspirin or indomethacin, when they are administered, they will inhibit the PGE2 synthesis. When PGE2 synthesis stops, its synthesis stops, automatically this ductus arteriosus will close off. So this is the main role which is played by PGE2. So also it helps in maintenance of the placental blood flow also. This is one more role which is played by the prostaglandins during the fetal life. Okay. Then the next action is on the platelets. Now, thromboxane A2. Okay, thromboxane A2, which is locally produced by the platelets. It is produced in the platelets. So this is a potent inducer of the aggregation. That is, when this particular thromboxane, it is released from the platelets, aggregation of the platelets will take place. More and more platelets will gather over there and they will start aggregating. So it is having pro-aggregatory action. That is, it promotes the aggregation of the platelets. So also endoperoxides G2 and H2. Both of these are also pro-aggregatory. That is, they will promote the platelet aggregation. Okay, now when do you want platelet aggregation to take place? That's when a blood vessel is damaged. You want a platelet plug to form, otherwise the blood will go on oozing out. So something should stop that blood from oozing out, right? So at that time, platelets come into picture. Aggregation of platelets will take place and they will result in clot formation. So this is a very important action which is carried out by the thromboxane because it has pro-aggregatory action. It will cause the platelet aggregation. Okay. On the other hand, this PGI2, that is prostacyclin, which is generated in the vascular endothelium, that is in your endothelium of the blood vessels. This is a inhibitor of platelet aggregation. So this PGI2, it is having opposite effect to that of thromboxane. Thromboxane produces the platelet aggregation, it induces the platelet aggregation, whereas prostacyclin or PGI2, it has anti-aggregatory property. That is, it will inhibit the platelet aggregation. It will not allow platelet aggregation to take place. Also, apart from PGI2, PGD2 also has anti-aggregatory action, but it is less potent as compared to PGI2. E2, it does not have any specific or significant action on the platelet aggregation. Okay, so here you can see that there are opposite effects which are shown. Thromboxane and PGG2H2, these are pro-aggregatory, that is, they will promote the platelet aggregation, whereas PGI2 and PGD2, they will oppose the platelet aggregation. So these are belonging to same categories. Both are prostaglandins, but they are having opposite action to each other. That's what the example I had given when we had started with the actions. Okay. Now coming to the role. Now what role it plays in the body? Now there are certain situations wherein the pro-aggregatory property is required, and there are certain situations wherein the anti-aggregatory properties are required, right? So pro-aggregatory action, that is the platelet aggregation, when it should take place? Only when the blood vessel is damaged. It should not take place when the blood vessel is not damaged. Correct? Okay. Now anti-aggregatory action, when it is required? When the blood vessel is not damaged. Okay, when the blood vessel is not damaged, you do not want the platelet aggregation to take place. Okay, so these two actions, that is formation of plug or platelet aggregation, only when the blood vessel is damaged, and preventing the platelet aggregation when the blood vessel is intact, it is not damaged. So that is taken care of by both of these, thromboxane A2 and PGI2, both having opposite actions. They act in a synchronized manner, or they act mutually with each other. They are mutually antagonistic system. So they act whichever of this, thromboxane A2 or PGI2. Okay, it depends upon the situation. So your body identifies what is the situation, whether pro-aggregatory action is required or whether anti-aggregatory action is required. So accordingly, either one of this will come into picture. Okay, whenever there is blood vessel which is damaged, okay, over there thromboxane A2 synthesis will increase and it will produce platelet aggregation. And if the blood vessel is not damaged, PGI2, it will have anti-aggregatory action and it will prevent the platelet plug from being formed in the intact blood vessel. That condition is known as thrombosis, formation of plug in the intact blood vessel. So that can be prevented by the PGI2. So both act mutually with a mutual understanding the situation, whether aggregation is required or not required. So depending upon the situation, the two will come into picture as per the requirement. Now coming back to your NSAIDs, if you can focus, almost most of the actions of your NSAIDs will be covered in this chapter. Okay, now your NSAID, aspirin is the example of NSAID. So when you give aspirin, what will happen? PG synthesis will be inhibited. Okay, so now thromboxane production, that will be inhibited. So what will happen to your hemostasis? It will interfere with the hemostasis, right? Because thromboxane A2, it has pro-aggregatory action. That is, it will promote the platelet aggregation. Now supposing aspirin is given and if you have a cut, what will happen to your blood vessel? Will the platelet aggregation take place? It will not take place very easily. Okay, those patients who are on aspirin, their blood do not clot very easily because of inhibition of platelet aggregation, because they inhibit the thromboxane A2 production. This is the one which is the thromboxane is the one which is getting mainly affected over here, synthesis of the thromboxane. So because of this, the blood does not clot very easily in those patients who are taking, or those patients who are regularly on the aspirin. Specifically, aspirin is also administered in the heart patients. Okay, now supposing any person who is on aspirin on a regular basis, if you have to carry out any surgery or operation, you need to stop the treatment 1 week before the surgery, before it itself gets metabolized. Deacetylation of the aspirin, it takes place mainly in the liver. That's a metabolic process of the aspirin. But before it itself gets metabolized, it will acetylate this enzyme COX-1. So it will inhibit this enzyme COX. Before even reaching your systemic circulation, it will inhibit the enzyme COX. So it is a very potent inhibitor of the enzyme COX. So obviously it will result in inhibition of the PG synthesis. Now this platelets, they are not able to generate or produce a new enzyme. Okay, that is COX. Once it is inhibited by aspirin, it is inhibited irreversibly. Okay, as I have already discussed this, aspirin is the one which inhibits the enzyme irreversibly. So unless and until new COX is formed, PG synthesis will not begin. And since platelets, they do not have any nucleus, they are not able to generate fresh COX. Okay, so platelets, unless and until regeneration of the platelets take place, new COX enzyme will not be generated. Okay, whereas the vessel wall COX will be generated, new COX will be formed in the blood vessel, but platelets are not able to generate new COX because they do not have any nucleus. So new synthesis of this COX will not take place. Okay, so as such, this aspirin, it has an anti-thrombotic effect. That is, they will prevent the platelet plug formation in an intact blood vessel because they inhibit the thromboxane A2 production. You all must have studied this under your drugs acting on the blood, anti-thrombotic drugs. Okay, aspirin or NSAIDs are one of the class of drugs over there. Okay, so they will produce the anti-thrombotic action. That is, it will keep the synthesis of thromboxane inhibited for even more than 3 days. So it has a very good anti-thrombotic effect. That is, they will prevent the platelet plug formation in an intact blood vessel. Then next, action on the uterus. Okay, PGE2 and F2 alpha, they can contract the human uterus, whether it is a pregnant uterus or a non-pregnant uterus. They are able to contract the uterus. Okay, that is, the smooth muscles present in the uterus can be effectively contracted. And the sensitivity of this uterus, it is higher during pregnancy. That is, PG is producing contraction of the uterus, it is higher during the pregnancy as compared to a non-pregnant uterus. And during pregnancy also the sensitivity go on increasing as the pregnancy progresses. Near term, the sensitivity even increases. It is the highest as the completion of 9 months take place. Okay. So PGs also have a role in the childbirth, initiation of the labor. Okay. The PGs also play a role over there. Okay. As it increases the uterine contractions. Okay. So even the cervix, okay, that is the opening, that is also softened. Okay, and it helps in the childbirth, these PGs. Okay. Now coming to the role. The first one, there are two roles which are played by these PGs. Okay, the first one is during the childbirth. That is, you will find this levels of these PG F2 alpha. These are also detected in the maternal blood. That is, in the mother's blood, you can find the high level of PG F2 alpha. Okay, as the term completes, okay, these PGs, they initiate and they help in progression of the labor. Okay, so labor pains, they begin because of the increase in the synthesis of these PGs, specifically PGF2 alpha. This initiates the labor and also it helps in the progression of the labor. So it will help in the childbirth, initiation of the labor and also the progression of the labor. Now supposing if you administer NSAIDs, what will happen? Aspirin is a NSAID, it will inhibit the PG synthesis. So what will happen? Initiation and progression of the labor, it will get delayed. Okay, so aspirin, it delays the initiation of labor and also it prolongs its duration. So NSAIDs should not be administered to the pregnant lady, especially near term. It should be avoided, otherwise it will delay the initiation of the labor. Okay. Then second role the PGs play is in the motility of the sperm. Okay, that is PGs. As we have seen in the actions, that it induces the contraction of the uterine smooth muscle. These PGs are also found in the semen. We have seen. Okay, so after the sexual intercourse, the semen, which also contains the sperm, it also has the prostaglandins. So these prostaglandin, it will induce local contractions of the uterus, so that the sperms which are released into the female genitals, it will help in the movement of the sperm and it will help in reaching out the sperm towards the ovum. So it will help in transportation of the sperm and it will facilitate the fertilization. It is not that PGs are required for fertilization to take place, but it will help, okay, in the transportation. So the coordinated movement of the female genitals, it will promote the sperms in reaching out the ovum, so that there are greater chances of fertilization of the ovum by the sperm. Okay, so it is facilitated. So this is the second role which is played by PGs. The third one is in the dysmenorrhea. This also we have covered under the reproductive system. In many women, they suffer from this condition called as dysmenorrhea, which is a pain which is associated with the menstruation. Okay, so this is basically because of increased PG synthesis by the endometrium, which is the internal layer of the uterus. So because PG synthesis is increased, it will result in increased uterine contractions. Okay, prostaglandins, as we have seen, they produce uterine contractions. Smooth muscles in the uterus will be contracted. So because of this, the blood vessels which are there in this endometrium, they will get compressed. So blood supply to this endometrium will be reduced. It will result in uterine ischemia and this will result in the pain which is associated with the menstruation. Okay, so now again coming back to your NSAIDs. So aspirin like drugs, what they will do? By inhibiting this PG synthesis, all these actions will be inhibited. So these will be helpful in controlling this dysmenorrhea. Okay, so aspirin like drugs or NSAIDs can effectively control the pain which is associated with the menstrual cycle. That is, dysmenorrhea can be effectively controlled by the aspirin. So